Hello, my name is Kelly, and hopefully this will be my haven on the internet where I can share my love for fiber art, but also just other ways that I like to stay creative. I started sewing just over 5 years ago, and that really got me interested in garment construction in general. And over the past year and a bit, I also picked up knitting. So I still consider myself a fairly novice knitter, but I am really proud of all the skills that I've picked up over the past few years. And yeah, I wanted to document this journey, share it with whoever might be interested, and also just to continue to learn throughout this process. And at the moment, I haven't done a lot of sewing. I think that mainly has to do with the seasons. I am based in the Southern Hemisphere, so we are exiting our winter months and now entering into our warmer summer months. So hopefully that will encourage me to go into my summer fabric stash and just work through that over the summer. This will follow a very traditional podcast style where I will share some objects that I have completed recently, as well as my works in progress. And I have one sewing project that I will share at the end as well. So if that interests you, please do stick around. And yeah, I hope you follow me on this journey as well. So I will jump into actually what I'm wearing. And this, I'm sure many people are familiar with this. This is the Cumulus blouse by PetiteKnit. I knit this, I want to say just over a year ago, and I think by far it is my most worn knit piece ever. I wear this at least once a week in the spring and autumn times. It is lightweight, but it is warm, and I live along the coast, so it is kind of perfect for that breezy weather that we always have. This is knit up in 2 strands of a very regular silk mohair by Simul Natural Fibers. And I think part of the reason why I love this so much is because of the color. I think it is just so beautiful and really is just a statement on its own. I did knit this off gauge. It's a bit smaller than what was recommended, but that was intended. I didn't want a very oversized blouse, and I also wanted my sleeves to be quite slim. So my sleeves are quite slim, but I didn't do any decreases because I wanted a fairly straight sleeve. But yeah, that is what I'm wearing today, and it may or may not make another appearance in another episode. So, to start off with finished objects, I will start off with, I think, the one that I'm most proud of, and this is the Rivendell Cardigan by Sari Nordlund. It was actually the first pattern that I bought from her, and so yeah, I'm quite proud to say that I've completed it. It is your very standard drop shoulder construction, so you start off by casting on at the back, and then you shape the shoulders by doing increases. You then pick up for the front, and you then join the backs and the fronts together, and you continue knitting flat until you've completed the body. Most of this is knit up in seat stitch, so you'll see the entire back is knit up in seat stitch, but in the front, along the button band, you have this beautiful, I don't know what you call it, but like charted pattern that creates this beautiful texture and has this cable running along the button band. So that's actually what drew me to this pattern, was just the very simple cable design, but I think it was enough with all of the seed stitch going on as well. And then you'll see for the sleeves, you also have these 2 cables that run, you can see if I can open it up for you, that also run down the sleeve, and also adds some beautiful texture. Yeah, I'm really proud that I completed this. It was a real beast to knit up, just because it was my first time doing an all over texture knit. It was my first time doing seed stitch as well, so it just felt like a really long time to complete. It felt like I was doing ribbing for the entire time. And then, you combine that with doing cables. Granted, it's only one cable, but there's cables. We've got twisted stitches. The hems of the body and the sleeves are also done in half twisted rib, which was also my first time doing it. And it was just a lot going on. And then, of course, you had to end it off with picking up for a double knit button band, which is notorious for taking a very long time. So this was it was a beast to knit up. I casted this on last year, November, so almost a year ago. And it just took me a long time to knit through it because I would get quite fatigued, and then I would let it rest for a few weeks, then I'd pick it up again, and then let it rest for a few weeks until it got to a point where I decided I just wanted to have this done because I did want the finished object in the end. But yeah, I had no issues following the pattern. This was also my first time following a chart, and yeah, I really had no issues with knitting this up. Now, the only thing that I can remember, or not really to do with the knitting process, but more to do with the fit, is that if I turn this around, you'll see that the shoulder seams are quite far back. And I noticed when I was knitting up the front shoulders for both sides that it was getting very, very long, much longer compared to the back. Now I know normally that is to accommodate for your bust, but I felt like this was just a lot bigger than what it was in comparison to that back yoke. And, I kept looking at the pattern to see if I had misread it, but, it seemed fine. And when I tried it on, that back seam really was like quite far behind my shoulder, and I didn't quite know if I liked that, if that was what the intention was. But when I looked at Sari's finished object photos, it seemed like that back seam was also quite far back on her shoulder. So maybe that was the intent. And I have worn this quite a bit since I completed it, and it doesn't bother me, like it doesn't feel uncomfortable. But it is just something interesting for me to note. And I'm not sure if that has to do with the type of shaping. I wonder if you would get the same issue if we had to do German short rows for the shaping in the back. But yeah, I wouldn't know. To be honest, I haven't knit a lot of drop shoulder patterns, so I'm not quite sure how they compare. But that was just something that I was a bit concerned about as I was knitting up this yoke. And otherwise, now that I have the completed object, I'm very happy. I knit this 2 pattern, and the only thing that I did change was the length of the body, and that was because I had not issues with my yarn, but I knew that I was playing a game of yarn chicken, so I didn't want it to be too long and not have enough for my sleeves. But yes, that is my thoughts on the pattern. And then for the yarn, I used 1 strand of Drops Flora along with 1 strand of Silk Mohair by Samuel Fibers as well. The color I used was color 18, and it's just like a very standard like blue-red. And when I bought this pattern, I knew that it had to be in like a very beautiful bright red. And I think that's also part of what really inspires me to wear this, because I think the color is just so fun. What you will notice is that the button band is a lot brighter than the body and the sleeves of this cardigan. And that is because I didn't have enough of the mohair that I initially used to complete the button band. So I decided, or initially I contemplated completing the button band after I finished the body before I went into the sleeves, but I wasn't quite sure about how much mohair I would have left, so I would rather have the sleeves and the body be the same color, and then because the button band is kind of its own thing, I was fine with it being slightly different. So I used this brighter mohair to compare, or not to pair, but to combine it with the Drops-Flora. And you can see that this mohair is a lot more orange and perhaps a bit more poppy in color compared to the rest of the cardigan. And I wish I had a bit of the original mohair that I used, but I don't. And so, if you can't even tell, the first half of this stitch is done in the original color, and the second half is in that more orangey poppy color. And so you may be able to notice that there's a bit more marling between that second mohair and the Drops-Flora as opposed to the first combination. And in this one you can see more clearly that marling between the second mohair and Drops-Flora combination. Now, initially I think I did have enough yarn that was required, but when I did do a gauge swatch, it was a bit smaller than what was intended. But I didn't want to go up another needle size because initially she has you cast on 3.5mm needles for the body. I gauge swatched with a 4mm needle, but I didn't want to go up to 4.5 because I was quite happy with the fabric that I had. So I decided to go up a size. So I think I knit up the third size when I was supposed to knit up the second size, just to accommodate for any sizing issues that I may have. And I think because my gauge swatch was small, I also had a shorter row gauge. So I was actually just doing more knitting, which required more of the mohair. So in the end of the day, I kind of knew what I was getting into. And I'm just really grateful that I had some of that poppy red. And honestly, I mean, I think it adds a bit of interest to the cardigan. It would have been nice for it to all be matching, but it's on a train smash and it hasn't prevented me from wearing this at all. And yeah, I'm just really proud that it's done and that I could complete this. Like I said, I get quite a bit of wear out of it. I think just because of the color. I think it's so fun to wear, especially like in the early autumn and spring times. Do I see myself making this again? I am not sure. I think one is enough to be a statement on its own, but you never know. Never say never. So yes, this is my Rivendell Cardigan by Sari Nordlund. Then next up, I have my Joo Sweater Light sweater by NovemberKnits. And this is just your regular raglan sweater where you cast on for the neckband, you knit down in 2x2 ribbing. You then do some shaping for the back while also increasing along the raglan stitches. Once you've done that, you just knit in the round to complete the yoke. You then split for the sleeves, knit the body, you pick up those sleeve stitches, and then you knit the sleeves down. These sleeves flare out, so you actually achieve that by doing a set of increases, and then you just continue knitting down until your desired length. And perhaps for me, the most interesting part about this sweater is the raglan increases, because it kind of continues that 2x2 stitch pattern into the raglan stitches, which I think is just so stunning and a wonderful way to make a very basic stockinette project very interesting. You will also notice that for the edges, I completed mine by doing I-cord. And originally, she actually has you do like a very regular bind off, but I didn't quite want to do that. I was just scared that it might roll up and it wouldn't rectify with blocking. So I thought, let me just go through the extra effort to do I-cord, and I really like it. This is actually my second time making this sweater. The first one I made was over a year ago in this beautiful peach color. and I loved it so much and I really liked making it. So I knew that I wanted to make another one. What is different though is that the pattern originally calls you to use an 18 stitch gauge. So 18 stitches on 4.5 millimeter needles. I knit this one on 4.5 millimeter needles, but I had a 21 stitch gauge, so a bit smaller than what was intended, and this fabric is also quite dense. For both, I used three strands of silk mohair, lace weight silk mohair, held together, whereas the original pattern calls for 2 strands of a silk mohair held together. I did that because for both of these colors, I had enough mohair in my stash to hold 3 strands together, and I thought that, I don't anticipate on making another sweater in this color. So I thought, I might as well just use it all up. And 2, I just wanted a more dense fabric. So this one I knit up on 4.5 millimeter needles, and this one I knit up on 5 millimeter needles, so that gave me a stitch gauge of 19 stitches, so a bit closer to that original stitch gauge that was recommended. So this one is obviously a bit more oversized compared to my original version, and the fabric is also not as dense. And then I think the only difference as well is that for the sleeves, I cord decreases, so it's a bit hard to appreciate, but there is like a slight cinch along that sleeve hem, whereas with this original version, I didn't do any I-cord decreases, so it kind of maintains that flare shape a bit more. And yes, I have gotten quite a bit of wear of this already as well, quite similar to my other one. I think this one is a bit more, it feels a bit more light and airy, I think just because of that lighter or that bigger gauge. And again, this color is just so fun. I think I'm in the stage where I just want to have a bit more color in my wardrobe. And what I've also noticed is that I prefer to wear cream or very light desaturated bottoms. And so it makes more sense to have very bright saturated tops to kind of create that contrast within my outfits. So I've been enjoying these really bright and colorful objects or like knit projects to add to my wardrobe. But yeah, otherwise, I have nothing else to say about this. I haven't had it that long. I think I've just had it for about a month in my wardrobe. But I mean, like I said, I've knit this before, so I know that I like the shape. I know that I like the process, and I do see myself making another one. I'm not quite sure in what color, but I really enjoyed working on it, and I wouldn't mind having another one in my wardrobe. And then on the wear of the yarn, so like I mentioned, I used 3 strands of a lace weight silk mohair, also by Samuel Natural Fibers. And I mean, this one I've worn a ton for the past year and a bit, and I mean, it barely shows any signs of wear. There may be like some mohair little balls, but otherwise I think it is worn so well. And I think it's what also draws me to making mohair only garments, just because they just wear so wonderfully. Similar to this Cumulus blouse that I'm wearing. I've worn this so many times and it still looks great. So yes, absolutely loved working on this one. And my only concern is the neckline. So there isn't a lot of structure. So I do think that I'm going to have to add in some elastic just to prevent this collar from losing its shape. But yeah, that is my Joo Sweater Light by NovemberKnits. Next up, and this is my last finished object for this episode, is a pair of very basic socks. So this is I think it's the Oh So Basic sock pattern by Summerly Designs. And this is the very first pair of socks that I completed. I actually casted these on, I think sometime last year, June. And I mean, at that point, I was still a very novice knitter. I don't know why I decided to cast on a pair of socks. It took me a very long time to complete this first one. It took me an even longer time to cast on for the second one. And then I think when I had completed the leg for the second sock, I just completely abandoned it. And I rediscovered it when I was cleaning up my stash a couple of weeks ago. And I usually don't like to have unfinished things in my wardrobes or in my storage. And so I thought, you know what, let me just finish this up. And to my surprise, it knit up so quickly. And I think part of that is because, you know, at the time when I first casted these on, I was very focused on garment knitting. That actually was the reason why I got into knitting. And I couldn't justify spending so much time on knitting a pair of socks that was just going to go on my feet. And I think now I just have a bigger appreciation for sock knitting, for the process. And I mean, I'm actually just quite in awe of like, you know, who came up with this? Like, who decided that like this was how you're going to create a pair of socks? I think it's so impressive. So I think there's just a greater appreciation now for the process, and I do anticipate myself making a lot more socks, and you'll see that I actually did cast on another pair. So yeah, this is just a very basic sock pattern. I'm sure anyone that has attempted to do socks have or is familiar with the basic sock pattern by Summerly Designs. It is a wonderful, wonderful resource. The pattern is free. The instructions really well written. She has a video series that takes you through all the steps. So I felt, yeah, like I didn't feel like it was completely, you know, overwhelming for me to complete this. And yeah, if you wish to venture into sock knitting, then I would highly recommend you do that. I knit up the second size, so I did 64 stitches with just regular 1x1 rib, and then did a full stockinette sock with a slip stitch reinforced heel. I think the only difference is that she originally has you do 16.5 centimeters for the leg. I only did 12 centimeters because I didn't want my leg to be that long. But yeah, and then also what I think is quite fun is that you can tell which sock I started on with. So this one I started knitting last year, and you can see just how terrible that 1x1 ribbing looks compared to this one. It's just a wonderful like testament to how much my knitting has improved. And yeah, I'm just really proud that I actually got it done. And then on the yarn, so this is from a local hand dyer called Big Box Yarns, and it's in their regular sock base, so 75% merino and 25% nylon. I think what I did find a bit odd is that they listed as a sport weight, but most socks are made with fingering weight yarn, and then when I looked at other sources, they then said it's a sock or like a sport / fingering weight. So I think it's maybe just a heavier fingering weight / light sport weight. And it comes in 366 meters per 100 grams, which I think is like a little bit less than what you would usually get for a fingering weight yarn. But needless to say, I mean, it still fits really well. I think it is just a bit more dense, and I had more than enough yarn to complete the set. And also what was fun is that even though it was a very basic stockinette, it was so fun to see the yarn knit up because it is a semi-solid. And so it was really exciting to see this beautiful yarn knit up. And yeah, I just really appreciated working with this yarn and this color and seeing how it will end up with the finished object. So that is my first pair of socks, but definitely not my last pair of socks. Now on to some works in progress. My first work in progress is the Colette Pullover by Sari Nordlund. And this is also a drop shoulder construction where you cast on for the back and then you shape the shoulders by doing increases. You then knit the yoke of the back and you pick up for the fronts. You then join the fronts and the backs and you knit down the body where you end with just regular 1x1 ribbing. I then picked up for one sleeve and then I still need to do the collar and the other sleeve. And then for the stitch pattern, you'll see that it is in this very pretty cable pattern that is broken up by rows of garter stitch and eyelets, which I'm not too sure if you can quite appreciate because it's so scrunched up and looks a bit funny, but I think when it's blocked, it will be really, really pretty. But yeah, I think this was really fun to work on because I think with cables and texture, you just have a really nice visual cue for your progress. And with this pattern in particular, you're not cabling that often. So it didn't feel like such a burden to work on this project. And it was just really fun to always get to the next section of the chart. Again, by Sari Nordlund, so the instructions were great, the chart was great. The only thing, and this is completely my fault, is that you will see that the eyelets look a little bit different than they do in the body, or at least the frequency of the eyelets. And that's because this was my first time doing eyelets by using yarn overs. And I interpreted initially as a yarn over knit one instead of just a yarn over. So you'll see that the frequency of the eyelets are a bit less in the body compared to in the sleeves. But strangely enough, it didn't really affect the numbers. When I was working up this body, I only realized that I was making that mistake when I started working on another pattern. So yeah, something that I learned. And I'm just really keen to see what this will look like when it's blocked. I mean, it's a bit difficult to appreciate, especially the sleeves. They look so skinny. So I'm keen to finish this up and yeah, just enjoy what it is supposed to look like. Then the only issue that I had while constructing this is with the sleeves. So in terms of size, so again, I knit up the third size, and that's because I got the right gauge on 4.5 millimeter needles. She originally has you cast on with 3.5, but I went up 2 sizes to get gauge. And I also knit the third size because a lot of people kind of complained about how it came out smaller than what they had thought it would, or what's based on the recommended positive ease. And when I checked in Ravelry, a lot of people had issues getting gauge. So I thought, okay, let me just go up a size, and then I'd rather have it be like a little bit more oversized than have it be like skin tight. With that, when I picked up for the sleeves, I had to change the rate of pickup because I had too few stitches compared to what I needed if I had followed what the pattern had required for the pickup rate. And I think that might be because my row gauge must have been a bit bigger because I did go up 2 needle sizes. And when you knit up the back yoke, you knit it according to like distance. So like she will say knit X amount of centimeters, and then you pick up for the fronts. instead of saying, you know, you knit X amount of rows. So I think because my row was a bit bigger, I actually had less rows and therefore less stitches to pick up for the sleeve. So I kind of had to do my own pick up rate, and I didn't want to pick up too few stitches because I didn't want my sleeves to be too skinny. So it worked out okay. I'll see what it looks like once I block it. Hopefully not terrible. But that was the only issue that I had with picking up for the sleeve. But yeah, otherwise, all I have to do is pick up for the collar and then complete this last sleeve, and then I am done. So hopefully this will be a finished object in the next podcast. And then for the yarn, I am also holding it with one strand of Drops4 in the color 7, and holding it with a strand of Silk Mohair by Samuel Fibers as well. And yeah, I didn't have any issues with it. It's been quite lovely to work with. And what I will say is that I got this last year when I was in a very beige phase, and honestly, like, it's quite uninspiring at the moment, but I had it in my stash and I had the perfect amount for this sweater. So I thought, you know what, let me just cast it on. I'll get a finished product out of it, and I can also get rid of some stash in my wardrobe. So there's that. But yeah, this is my Colette pullover, and hopefully I'll be done in the next podcast. Next up, I have the Copenhagen Cardigan by PetiteKnit. And I did pin the button band because it was rolling up quite a bit, so I wanted you still to appreciate it. But yes, this is very basic raglan cardigan where you cast on for the neckband that's like tiny, and then you do some shaping for the back while also doing your raglan increases. This pattern makes use of a 2-stitch raglan. And yeah, you just knit the yoke, split for the sleeves and the body, knit the body while also knitting the button band at the same time. Once you've completed that, you pick up for the sleeves, knit that down, do some 1x1 ribbing, and then I still have one more sleeve to knit for this one. And yeah, very, very simple and easy and fun to work through. And again, didn't really have any issues. The only thing that I will talk about is the button band. So it is lovely that you do knit it at the same time, because once you do finish the body, then you're done with the body. You don't have to go back up and pick up for it. But I think I've just come to realize that I prefer the structural integrity that comes with a double knit button band. Even if it takes a lot longer, I think they just look amazing. And again, that like structural integrity is just lovely. And it was also difficult to kind of change the buttonhole placements just because I think you do the buttonholes every 16 stitches. So in the pattern, she recommends that if you want to lengthen or shorten your length of the cardigan, you need to shorten it by 16 stitches. But for me, I feel like as it is now, it's almost like 2 centimeters too long. But if I had to shorten it by 16 stitches, it would be way too short. So that's just something that one needs to keep in mind. And I think maybe next time I would maybe choose to space the buttonholes by 15 stitches. So that way I'm like incrementally decreasing the length, and then it's not too short, but also not too long. But, yeah, I also think that I just have an issue with like cardigans that are a bit too cropped. So maybe it is a good thing that I have one that's a bit on the longer end. And, it's just very basic as well. So I'm quite keen to still have the finished product in my wardrobe. This is knit up with 2 strands of, again, lace weight silk mohair by Samuel Natural Fibers. I have always wanted a mohair cardigan, and it took me a very long time to settle on a pattern, but I settled on this one because I wanted something simple and just something that would be quick to work up on. I actually knit my mom a Cumulus blouse with the same yarn in the same color, and she looked amazing in it, and I knew that I wanted to have a garment in that same color as well. So I'm quite happy that I can finish this one up soon, and then we can be matching. So yeah, I think this should definitely be done by the next podcast as well. Then next up, I have a pair of socks, and I have completed the first one already. It hasn't been blocked yet, and I have just started for the second one. And this one, I didn't use a pattern for it, but it is entirely inspired by a pair of socks that Rachel by Those Twins Who Knit made recently. So it is a 3x3 ribbed sock that starts off by doing twisted ribbing for the cuff. I then went straight into the 3x3 ribbing. I decided on a reinforced slip stitch heel, flap and gusset, and then I went straight into the foot and the toe. And then to add a bit more interest to the sock, I also did a contrast heel and toe. So for this sock, I designed it around the yarn because this yarn has some really pretty browns and oranges that I wanted to shine through. And it is also by Big Fox Yarns. It is in the color Burnt Honey, which I think is the perfect name for it. Just to have, those oranges and those browns, like very, very warm browns, peep through. And so I wanted a sock that was fairly basic, but also had like a little bit of interest, and so that's why I decided on a pair of ribbed socks. And so you can kind of see those colors really, really shine through. And because it was so basic, I did just decide to do a contrast heel and toe in this peach color, which is this one right here. And this is also by Big Fox Yarns in the color Satin. So it is just a lovely peach color, and it actually matches, or almost matches, my sweater over here. This is definitely a bit lighter, but I thought that was quite nice. So yeah, oops. This knit up very quickly, and I trust that the second sock will also knit up quite quickly. But I'm just really excited to have it in my, sock collection. This will be sock number 2, and I probably won't wear this anytime in the summer, but I'm keen to see how they will perform in the winter time because I get very, very cold feet, and I think having some very nice warm dense merino socks will be lovely for that. So that is my lovely pair of socks that is a work in progress. And then lastly, I have the Poet Scarf by Sari Nordlund. A lot of Sari today. And I never thought that I would be an accessories knitter because the main reason why I got into knitting was to knit garments. I felt like it was a gap in my wardrobe, and I don't know what inspired this, but I just felt like I wanted some more accessories in my wardrobe, and I was just so obsessed or blown away by this beautiful stitch pattern. And for me, these look like little leaves that is like knit up, and then it also has this beautiful seed stitch as well. And I can't wait to see what this will look like blocked, because now it's looking a bit frumpy, but it's just been so wonderful to work up. It's been slow because even though the chart is very clear, it's not something that comes intuitively. So I feel like I always need to have my chart with me to reference what I'm doing and to make sure that I'm on the right track. So it has been a bit slow in that sense, but I am in no rush to have this completed. It's just really nice to have when I do have a moment to put my attention to it and do a few rows and to see it knit up. I will say that even though it's very slow, it is addicting, because just to see this pattern knit up is just, yeah, it's so, so beautiful. But I've seen quite a few people knit this up recently. I don't know why, but yeah, I'm keen to have joined the club. And yeah, I'll be happy to have this in the autumn time. So it's still quite a few months away. And this matches quite well with my Cumulus blouse. And the yarn that I'm using is, again, a strand of lace weight silk mohair by Samuel Fibers with a sock base by Cowgirl Blues, which is also a local hand dyer. So this is in their sock base, and it's also in 75% merino, 25% nylon. At the time when I knit this, at the time when I bought this yarn, I didn't know what I was going to use it for, if I was going to use it for a pair of socks or for something else. So I rather just decided on a sock base in case I did need that like nylon content for socks. But I ultimately decided on the scarf just to match with this beautiful Cumulus blouse. So it's been knitting up quite well. I'm keen to see how it will block, and yeah, quite lovely. This is my first lace knit that I've done before, and it's incredible like how it can look so intricate when it's actually not that bad to knit up. So it's been really, really lovely to venture into some lace knitting. So yeah, that's my poet scarf. And I also bought the poet socks, so hopefully I can knit that up at some point in the near future. So that wraps up all of my knitting projects, but I do have one sewing project to share, and that is the Brier trousers by Daughter Judy. I've been a fan of Daughter Judy's designs before. This is the first thing that I've sewed from them, but I'm just intrigued by the designs. Based on this pattern that I've done, they are very high quality, and I was very happy with the process. So this pair of trousers is a super high-waisted pair of pants that she describes as like a sailor cut. So it has a very wide leg, and originally it's designed to kind of cut you at the ankle. I did, however, extend my pair by about 10 centimeters because I generally don't like pants that hit me at the ankle. So I just added about 10 centimeters to both legs. I had the best time sewing this up. I thought the instructions were great. I thought that the instructions for the front fly were also very easy to follow. I've done quite a few front fly constructions, and this one I think was one of the best instructions. It was just very easy to sew up and didn't feel like it was too overwhelming. So very happy with how that went. And I also felt like the waistband just went on really well. So overall, I had a very good experience with the construction of these trousers. Then for the fabric, I decided on a pair of medium weight corduroy. And this is my first time working with corduroy, which was quite interesting in the sense that you really have to be careful with the way that you handle it, because the main nap is quite sensitive, especially like when you're pressing. you have to be very careful with how you handle it throughout the sewing process. So I think that made me a bit more nervous going into this project. All in all, I think it will keep me very warm in the cooler months. The only thing is that because it is a medium weight, I feel like it doesn't really hold the shape very well of the legs. And so I feel like you can't really appreciate the shape of that original design. I think if I have to do this again, I would choose a heavier denim or cotton canvas, or maybe even a heavier corduroy, just so that like you can really appreciate that shape of the trousers. But that is needless to say, I will still get a lot of wear out of it. I haven't really worn it since I've made it because, again, we are kind of entering into our warmer months. And so I will save that for when we do head into our autumn and winter season. But yeah, I love them. And the color, again, like I mentioned earlier, I prefer to wear kind of light desaturated bottoms, and this cream color just fits perfectly into that. I do see myself making another pair, but I do want to try some other trouser constructions and designs before I go back to this one. So yes, that is the first podcast. I hope you've had a wonderful time if you've stuck around up until this point. Like I said, I do hope to step into more sewing, and I kind of want to approach my sewing in the same way I approach knitting, where, it's little progress at a time. Whereas I think with sewing, sometimes I would block out like 8 hours and commit, that time to sewing, but then that can create a bit of burnout. So, I just want to create some slow progress with my sewing as well. But otherwise, I hope to see you guys next time. I think I intend on making these once a month, just so that it's feasible for me to make this sustainable and to also have enough time to work through my projects to share in the next podcast. So until then, I hope you have a wonderful day or evening wherever you are, and thank you so much for sticking around.